So I'm going to take you through different tools, methods used for program design and planning. So as we have mentioned, a log frame approach, logical framework approach, theory of change, and outcome mapping. Dina is saying my camera is off, but my video says it's on.
No, it's not off. I just said maybe you should just drop it a little so you position in the center.
Sorry.
There we go.
Does that work?
Yes, that was
you see my forehead?
offline communication, yes.
Okay, so we will start with the logical framework, which is commonly known as the log frame. So a log frame is commonly used as a planning tool. And there are so many potential uses for the logical framework. So it really is the Swiss Army knife of the community, development community. And there are two phases to developing a large project log frame. The first phase would be the analytical phase and the design phase. So in the analytical phase, there is an undertaking of a stakeholder analysis where you take stock of all the stakeholders that are going to be pertinent in your project or in your initiative and how they will contribute and so forth. And also you will also do a project analysis. This is where you use the problem tree to identify the actual problem that you seek to address and how it will fit into the how you will fit into the contribution or to alleviate the problem. And also there is objectives analysis and an analysis of selected alternatives to your initiative. And then this will, this analytical phase will also feed or inform the design phase, because that is where you will start with assessing external factors. So you first define the project elements, which we have already looked at some of them. So that's the goal, the outcome, the outputs, and the activities. And then you define those. And then when you move to the next phase, this is where you then look at each and every element here that the project elements and see what the possible risks and assumptions are in terms of reaching that phase, or how you would seek to alleviate those if there are risks, and then how you would deal with the assumptions that come in, so that to be able to reach your goal or your intended, to make your intended impact for the project, for the initiative or the project. And lastly, you also develop your indicators and means of verification for the goal, outputs, and also for the outcomes. So what's really important to note here for this logical framework is that it allows you to have your impact, your indicators developed on the upfront, and these will be instrumental for your MEL plan. Okay, I will move to the theory of change. So theories of change can be developed in many ways, but there are common elements that include the articulation of how change happens in a particular context. So clarification of organizational roles in contributing to change, and the definition or testing of critical assumptions are part of what the theory of change is intended to do. And theory of change can also be seen as an ongoing process, the discussion, which is the discussion-based analysis and learning that produces powerful insights to support program designing, implementation, evaluation, and impact assessment. Or the theory of change can also be seen as a product. So theory of change, it can be communicated through diagrams. As you can see here, this is the whole diagram with all these pathways of change. or it can be, the diagram can also be accompanied by a narrative, which describes it in detail what the diagram is all about. And another way that the theory of change can be used for is it can be used as a product, and it's often presented, when it's used as a product, then it can be used, both the diagram and the narrative for the project to be able to know, for the implementers to be able to know exactly what is detailed, and what the story of change is for the initiative. And there are 5 essential steps to developing or process rather for developing a theory of change. So you start by defining your long-term goal, and then you identify what the outcomes and map pathways of change. So as you can see, if we go back to this diagram, these arrows that feed into this top goal, these would be the pathways of change that describe the story of change. And then the third process step would be to operationalize your long-term goal and outcomes. Then you develop which includes developing your indicators. And then you identify your actual interventions. That is where your actual, your organization or your initiatives actually fit into the stories and how it contributes to the change. And also, this is where you will finally articulate what the assumptions and risks are to ensure that if anything happens in terms of assumptions, you'll be able to combat that. And then we move to the third tool, which is outcome mapping. So outcome mapping is designed to be at the beginning of the program, after it has been decided on. And it is usually a participatory planning methodology, which has implications on how monitoring evaluation is conducted. It is based on 3 principles, which is the boundaries of influence. Outcomes are understood as changes in behavior, and there is also the importance of boundary partners, as you will see. I will go into details. So there are 7 steps to outcome mapping, or there could be more. And outcome mapping steps are all designed to be used, as I have said, at the planning stage at the beginning of the program. But they also set a scene for how the monitoring and evaluation will be conducted later on, which is why they are developed upfront. And the first step is to develop a vision, describing any maybe economic, political, social, and environmental changes that the program hopes to bring about. So it answers questions on how should the world be. You can use this main question to visualize how you want the world to be as a result of your intervention. And then the next step is to develop a mission statement, which is developed to describe how the project intends to support the vision. And the mission statement states the areas in which the program will work towards the vision, but it doesn't list all of the activities. It just gives a snapshot of what it intends to achieve. And then the third step is the boundary partners. So you identify your boundary partners using the question, which of those actors' role could your invention influence? So these are the boundary partners can be individuals, groups, or organizations which the program interacts directly with, and also it includes where opportunities or influence can be found for your intervention. And the fourth step is developing an outcome challenge statement for each boundary partner that has been identified. and it describes how the behavior, relationships, and activities or actions of the individual or group or institution will change if the program is extremely successful. And then this will lead to step 5, which is a strategy map, guided by the question, how could you influence these actors? So a strategy map is developed to help identify strategies used by the program to contribute to the achievements of each outcome challenge. And then that will lead to step 6, which is a set of program markers that are identified for each boundary partner. And these are desired visible behavioral changes ranging from minimum to maximum of what you could expect to see boundary partners doing as an early response to the program. So what you would like to see, and finally what it would love to see. And then the 7th step here, the purpose is to identify the organizational practices which will use that the program or that your project will use to be effective. So these organizational practices describe a well-performing organization that has the potential to support the boundary partners and to sustain change interventions over time. And also, in addition, after all these steps, what is additional is to establish some monitoring journals of your outcomes and to also develop maybe a descriptive MEL plan. So that would feed, you could actually use the outcome mapping to feed it into your MEL plan. So are there any questions here before we get into comparing these tools? Or does anything jog your memory on, you might not have mentioned or you might not have used it as outcome planning, or maybe have used it, but not knowing that you are actually doing outcome planning or developing a theory of change or log frame? Are there any steps in here that you have used in your planning, in your organizations?